you get out of town in time. You don't get caught in the traffic. You got to get back up to Maine, I guess.
Right.
And everything. But welcome very much to Manhattan Network and Conversations. Really good to meet you here on the set.
Thank you. I much appreciate you inviting me on this show.
It's my great good pleasure. And welcome to you in the audience. A pleasure to welcome to the program John Rutledge, Cheshire. We got him billed as a new product developer, which bespeaks entrepreneurial and inclinations and so forth. But welcome very much to the audience, and welcome to you, John. I wonder if you could, we got 58 minutes here. It's a long time in television. But could you share your background, some of your education, and that sort of thing? And I think your middle name is Rutledge, which bespeaks your long roots, your family roots, back to the beginning of the United States Republic and so forth. You might be worth mentioning. But if you could, this is going to be the John Cheshire Hour.
Okay. Well, thank you.
My pleasure.
Starting with the Rutledge, that's my mother's family's name, and they came from Charleston, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. John Rutledge was the older brother. He had two brothers. My immediate grandfather was Hugh Rutledge, the middle brother, and the younger brother was Edward, and their cousin was Arthur Middleton. There were four of them. Mm-hmm. They were fortunate enough to start life by going to the Inner Temple Bar in London. And that was very expensive to get over there in those days, but all four of those men went to the Inner Temple. Mm-hmm. And if you'll recall, South Carolina was under colonial rule at that point, so mm-hmm. if they were educated in England and came back to the Charleston, which was which was a growing community, but they had quite a clout, because otherwise whatever decision had to be made would go to London and then back. But if they short-circuited that, because they'd been there, and they sort of, their decisions were pretty well accepted.
And they were accepted in the 1760s, 1770s?
Oh, no, this was early, well, yes, in the 1750s to the 60s.
Yes.
And John Rutledge was the leader. He later became the first governor. He wrote the South Carolina Constitution. He was a big property owner, and they didn't know till the last minute that he was not going to remain loyal to the British government. But all four of them, even though they'd been to school in England, became patriots. And Edward and Arthur Middleton signed the Declaration of Independence.
Wow.
And John was the head of the drafting committee for the U.S. Constitution.
My Lord, you have roots that go way back.
He later became a Supreme Court justice and was put up by Washington as the Chief Justice, but because of his intemperate way of going, he drank a fair amount of liquor, and he objected vociferously to the Jay Treaty, which was a temporary expedient to make peace with the British. The Congress decided they withheld his nomination, but the results were moot because he died.
Yeah, he became the Supreme Court before John Marshall. Then.
Marshall was quite a bit later.
Yeah. I mean, giant figure in that way. But your roots go way back, and that's it. You called them patriots. I don't think George III saw them as patriots. If we hadn't been successful, they would have been hung by the yardarm.
John Rutledge was listed as a founder in most books.
Yeah.
Now, Edward was younger, and Arthur Middleton, they didn't have the distinguished record that he did. He was and my grandfather was a very successful lawyer and very lucrative practice, and supported their political activities, although he was head of the Senate in South Carolina, but he didn't have the national recognition that they did.
They had, and that was out of South Carolina.
All out of Charleston.
Incredible assemblage of people came together at the time of the Constitutional Convention and so forth. Just unbelievable what happened, and an exciting story, and it set a template for the modern world in a very large sense. Yeah.
Well, lawyers in those days, some of them gave their all. John Rutledge almost died a couple of times because he had given all his money to the troops, and he was broke, and he was very depressed, nearly committed suicide. But they gave of their all.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Home Box Office had a wonderful series on John Adams recently.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had a chance to see it. I thought it was really good history, and it's good.
Excellent.
And so we set up, there's a man named Herman's written a book called How the Scots Invented the Modern World and Everything in It. He's a serious historian and claims that it was the Scottish Enlightenment that set the tone for the modern, what we call modernism, with, you know, you had Adam Smith and you had the steam engine, you had Hume and so forth. But we set a template, and a lot of people are taking view of the United States as being a pace setter for having set the template that constitutes what we call the modern world. Do you think there's that's a correct thing? And is the pattern that we've set adequate for what the future requires, in a sense that we've got the bounding principles right, and that the world will follow our example to their good advantage? Or what do you think in that long historical sense?
Certainly the early lawyers set up the rules of private property, which is really the underpinning of our republic. And not only did they set up the rules, but they set up a means of enforcing the rules. Problem with South America, they have the rules, but they don't enforce them. There's virtually no law, as you'll find out from some of my travels down there. The rules are on the books, but it's a matter of personality, not of the law itself. The law does not really mean that much. It's who actually is operating.
It was sort of a continuation of, they call it latifundia, and it was a continuation in a certain sense of the agricultural feudal patterns coming out of history, it would seem, as opposed to what was able to get established here in North America.
Well, the implementation, for instance, of contracts down there is almost impossible. It depends on who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
It doesn't depend on the contract. The contract will say exactly the same, but if the other man in the contract is someone that's not important in that situation, you might as well not have a contract. So the law per se is not meaningful. This is a country of law and not people. Now, that isn't altogether true, but it is on a relative basis. It is very true. If you have a law in this country, you can implement it. In South America, that is not true.
Or much of the world, perhaps.
Well, much of the world.
So that we do have a model that many people are...
And that goes back to our founders.
It does indeed, at a very important moment in the evolution of human affairs.
Exactly.
There was a template set. Maybe Mr. Herman is right, that we invented, and there was a huge Scottish involvement.
I don't think we invented it. I think we inherited that from the English common law. And in that regard, even though there was fierce, bitter fighting between the British Army and the American colonists in the Revolution, if you ever saw The Patriot, I think that's pretty true.
I've seen it.
But the law that the English laid down was invaluable to the... We have the greatest real estate in the world right in the United States, and we have a very temperate climate, and we have this law system which we abide by. And the combination of the bloodstock that we have and the laws and the country is what makes us successful.
And we've been overwhelmingly successful.
We have.
And I did my graduate work in geography, and this was a blessed continent. And they had the taconite and the coal placed right, and you could go and they could build, and we had the resources. And the soils of the Midwest are some of the richest in the world.
Sure.
Couldn't
but
be
now going back to shrimp, if you want to do that.
You want to get to your shrimp, okay? Yeah, because you...
I don't know how soon you want to get into that.
Well, I'm wondering, could you share, we were talking about your family background, but your educational background, maybe we could get to briefly, and then we'll get to the shrimp.
I went to school in a private school, sort of a tutorial school in Charleston, South Carolina, called the Goud School. Mr. Goud was a graduate of the University of Chicago, and he ran a little school with about maybe 16 to 20 students.
Okay.
And he ran it all himself. He didn't have any assistants, and so he was the whole show. And he was a real taskmaster.
Okay.
From there, I went to New England. I got a scholarship through my aunt to a school called the Avon Oliphant School in Connecticut, near where my wife, who went to Miss Porter's school, went.
Is that like a prep school? Or?
It's a prep school.
Yeah, right.
From there, I got a scholarship to Yale. When I was 16, I went to Yale.
At 16, you were very young.
I was, but it was during the war.
All right.
The class of 42.
God bless you.
If you saw that movie, it's just, I'm sure the ladies around those days, I'm not sure that I knew them, but they were there. Anyhow.
And what did you study at Yale? Or did you
chemical engineering.
You went to chemical engineering.
And I was in NROTC, and we went 5 terms. And then I was commissioned in the Navy in January of '44 at age 18 years and 1 month.
Holy Toledo, that was very young.
I spent 3 years in the Navy, came back, finished Yale, then went to MIT for a year. I applied to the Harvard Business School, and they said, well, we'll accept you on the basis of your curricula and your experience, but we're going to delay it a year. So I took a year off and got a master's degree at chemical engineering at MIT.
I see. Okay.
They had accepted me.
I see.
And
okay.
I spent 6 months of that working at Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Oh, okay.
At the Y12, X10, K25 uranium plant.
Okay.
Run by Union Carbide on a cooperative basis.
The big boy had been dropped in the events at the University of Chicago had taken place, and you'd studied physics considerably also.
The University of Chicago was in 1942,
yes.
and of course Hiroshima was in '45. This was in '47. It was a couple of years later. I also went to the island of Bikini when they dropped the bomb there. I was just there just after they did that. Well, anyhow, going on, I then left. I went through the Harvard Business School, and my suite mate was a man named Stuart Davidson, and his youngest sister happened to be Julie Davidson. And the only thing I really got out of the Harvard Business School was my wife.
Well, that's the best thing you can get.
That's the best thing that
That's
ever
the most
happened to
important thing what can happen to
and
somebody.
we have now been married for, what is it, Julie, 52 years?
Congratulations and counting. That's great.
Okay.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So then after MIT, after the business school.
That was at Harvard then? Yeah.
I went to the Harvard Business School, got out in 1951. Then I went to work for the DuPont Company, and went through the usual succession of manufacturing, sales, research, and then I got to be a group manager of sales assistants. Then I got to be a research manager, and then I was moved into new product development.
Okay, sounds like the title we've got up for you here is new product
and
developer.
That's where that was really a spot. I reported to a man that was later the governor of Delaware, and he reported to a man that was later the chairman of the board of International Paper. So while it wasn't a large group, it was quite influential.
Yes, indeed. I understand. Yeah,
and our job was to identify unique research opportunities, hopefully before anyone else did, and then put them in a package that they could be commercialized as a product for the DuPont Company.
And you found your entrepreneurial inclinations and so forth.
I love this.
Yes.
We worked on a number of different products, but that's how I got into the shrimp business.
Right.
Because this group from Japan arrived, and they had been working, at those days, there were no shrimp farms, none.
Oh, okay.
Zero.
Right, okay, yeah.
And this group arrived, this was in 1967.
67,
Right.
Okay.
And
you're still doing the research in the company and so forth?
well, I was working in the new business department at DuPont.
I see, okay.
And this group was an outside group that had been supported by the Taiyo Fishing Company, which was a big fishing company in Japan. And the principal involved was a funny old doctor named Dr. Fujinaga.
That's a pronounceable name.
Motosuke Fujinaga, and he did his work in Io, Japan, and he started his work in 1930.
Okay, he'd
1930.
been at it. Yeah, he'd been at it. Yeah. Right.
And at that point, if a shrimp, a mother shrimp, which we call them, that is the female shrimp, laid her eggs, and you saw the product of what she laid, no biologist at that point could have identified any of the pre-larval forms as a shrimp per se.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. They would have floated around and they wouldn't know what they were.
Huh.
So what Dr. Fujinaga did was develop the life cycle of the shrimp.
Right.
And this went on for quite a long time. It was interrupted by World War II, but that was 1930 to 1940.
He was entrepreneurially inclined in terms
no,
of...
he was strictly
research. Yeah, okay.
Supported, difficult old man, if I do say so.
Okay.
And often you find that.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's the common occurrence, is that the early research people...
idiosyncratic, huh?
Yeah, that's why they're doing research. They get away from their family and their wives, and they bury themselves in research. There's
a saying Marshall McLuhan used to say that the fish has a hard time seeing the water in which it swims. It's got to be outside. It's part of a creative process, some artistic advancement of knowledge that go along those lines too. Creativity.
So Dr. Fujinaga sort of continued on with his work at Ohio until after World War II, and then he had identified. See, the operation of the hatchery is really, from a standpoint of a marine biologist, is fascinating. Because
operation of the what? I'm sorry.
A hatchery.
Hatchery. Sorry, I didn't. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
From the standpoint of a marine biologist.
Yes.
Because what happens is that a mature female shrimp will, I suppose, get the feeling that they want to have shrimp. I'm not a mother shrimp, but that's the way they,
No,
they,
you're not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they will eat a highly specialized diet of very rich marine animals, and they develop a broad row in the back of their shrimp, and it takes about 30 days.
Okay.
And we reproduced all this, and I don't know how much of this you want to go into.
Well, it's interesting, yeah.
Well, that's what he didn't do this artificially. He would gather these shrimp from the wild. He would identify the gravid mother shrimp, and then we call them gravid, meaning that they're full of eggs.
Okay.
Full. Gravid means full.
Okay.
All right. And then the shrimp mate with each other. They copulate. It's a beautiful operation. The male is smaller than the female, and they were like two aeroplanes meeting. There's not a lot of forgive
courting?
me.
Is there courting?
Not a lot of sort of fooling around before. I mean, what do you call that? The
foreplay.
Foreplay.
Yeah.
It's not. Thank you.
Right.
It's not much foreplay, but the physical act is beautiful because they go like this, and then the male hits the shrimp like the female like this, and depending on the variety, if it's a white shrimp, he glues his they call the spermatophore, and he loses his spermatophore
in the process.
Yeah, to the horror of most male, the spermatophore is lost in the process.
Freud
of
would have a wonderful time with that, wouldn't he? Yeah.
This doesn't sound too great from the standpoint of the male.
We better not push those biological metaphors too far.
Anyhow, in the case of the brown shrimp, the spermatophore is implanted in the genitalia, the thelia, we call it, of the female shrimp.
And that encourages the sperm, or the comparable to sperm?
No. This doesn't work that way. The spermatophore is implanted. And now, after the act is over, and she sits there and is feeling sort of as though
languid
and cuddly, and she's just sitting there just feeling wonderful. And then all of a sudden, she releases the eggs. The eggs now have, the moment has occurred in nature when the eggs that are in her back, she has about 500,000 eggs.
Wow.
500,000.
Yeah.
And when she releases the eggs, the spermatophore that either has been glued on her thelia or has been implanted in her, is opened, and the sperm magically
pours out
and fertilizes each of the eggs just as it hits the water. Now, she's in salt water.
Okay.
And now, if the magical act of fertilization occurs, all the eggs become viable. If something goes wrong, as soon as the sperm and the eggs come together, nothing happens. They're sort of they die, and you can see them dying in the tank.
Well, I'm trying to get a sense, like, say, in the human form of biology, you have an ovum, one,
right,
and then you got, I don't know, 500 million sperm, and one penetrates and does it.
Right.
Now, did I hear you say that all of the eggs that she has are fertilized?
Virtually, in a.
That's going to make Mr. Malthus really sit up and take notice.
Oh, that's the thing, and that's why running a hatchery, a productive hatchery, is very productive and efficient, because one or two, well, half a dozen females can fertilize an enormous crop.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
And do they have, like in breeding horses, they do a thing? My daddy used to play the horse a little bit, and he said always bet class.
Listen, let's talk about shrimp. I can't talk about horses. I don't want to talk about crabs, and snails, fish. Forget it.
Shrimp.
Just
We're on to shrimp. Okay, good. It's a big subject.
This is unique. Don't make parallels to anything else.
Advice taken. Thank you. Yeah.
No, people keep wanting to
bring in the
something
externalities.
else can happen. This is just shrimp.
Right.
Okay. Now, let's go through the hatchery operation.
Okay.
When the egg, curiously, it's got a yolk attached to it. So in the first stage, you don't really have to do much. That's called the nauplius, the nauplii. And it goes through 4 moldings.
Okay.
Before we're done getting to a larval shrimp, you're going to go through 4 stages and 4 moldings. That's 16 different stages before you get to a larval shrimp, a post-larval shrimp, which is about that long.
Okay. Is that like a zygote or something, or?
No, it's
not
like
molecular, or
let's not release it to anything else. Let me describe it.
Okay. Sorry.
You go through a nauplius, and it's got a couple of little appendages to it, and it's got a yolk, which feeds the first stage, which is the nauplius.
Okay.
But the yolk, curiously, and this is an unbelievable facet in nature, the little appendage is growing, and to grow it has to shed its shell, so it sheds its shell, and because otherwise it wouldn't grow. It's a hard shell animal.
Yes.
So it sheds, and that's what a molt is.
A what?
A molt, M-O-U-L-T.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it molts 4 times as a nauplius. Now the next problem you have, and it's called a zoea, is at that point the zoea starts to take sustenance from the tank in which it's been laid.
Or in the ocean if it's in the ocean.
Well, in the ocean.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, okay.
But now in the natural cycle, this occurs. The eggs. You're going to have to translate from the natural cycle to a hatchery cycle.
Right. That's one of the challenges. Yeah.
Because in the natural cycle, the laying occurs in the salt water, and then the natural currents of the ocean washes these little animals up into the bios, or in the Spanish it's esteros, but into a condition where both of these are a mixture of fresh and salt water.
I see. Okay. Brackish.
Brackish water. Because none of this can occur in a completely saline solution.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So you have to vary the salinity. You have to vary the feed.
If you're in the the hatchery. Yeah.
But in a hatchery now, you don't have to do that. It will actually, you have to provide the feed to each intervening stage.
Right.
So now let's take I could divide a feed cycle for you in the natural environment.
Yes, please. It might be good. Yeah.
Well, it's simply, I'll go through the feed cycle in the hatchery so that you'll understand.
And then back to the natural.
And that's to the natural,
Okay.
because the natural provides natural feed, and you have to provide artificial feed in the hatchery.
Right.
Okay, so now we go from Monopolis to Zoea. Now, you have to, in a separate tank, you have to create the plankton to feed the Zoea stage, and then swirl it around, since they're all swirling around in a tank, and get and it's a phytoplankton, a short branch plankton. It can't be long, because they don't have the ability to eat a long branch plankton. It's got to be a short branch or a phytoplankton.
Okay.
Later you're going to feed Zoea, which is zooplankton. So now you go through, you've grown the plankton on the side, and you feed it into the tank, and now the little shrimp. Each section takes about 4 days. So now you start feeding in the plankton to feed the Zoea stage. Excuse me, the Zoea stage, right? You go through 4 moldings, and now you're getting the next molding. And each time you have a molding, the little animal picks up another appendage on its body. So if you see it through the microscope, you start seeing these things magically starting to grow.
Isn't it amazing?
And then you go into the Zoea stage, and now the animal, instead of phytoplankton, you're feeding them zooplankton, which is an animal plankton, and it's got a longer chain.
Animal plankton.
Zooplankton.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And so now they're starting, and then you go through you go through the mysis stage. Now you're almost now you're into pre-larval, and now you start feeding something more substantial, and you can actually start feeding them ground up artificial feeds, because they're big enough now to take more substance. And you put in a pulverized shrimp food, which is mostly made out of soybeans. Okay.
Now, is it, in the natural state, if those things are lacking in the environment where those
they'll just
eggs,
die.
They'll just die by the millions, presumably.
Sure. Well, you're starting with half a million, and in a natural
from
state,
one shrimp.
Yeah, but in the natural state, you might only wind up with 10 or 12.
Yeah, out of that.
Out of that,
amazing.
or 15.
Right, and to where those things come together.
Where in a hatchery,
yeah,
you can keep 2/3 of them alive.
Yeah, well, and you can keep track of that and do it. That's an intervention in the process, the natural process, that is kind of unique to humanity to be able to do it, isn't it? You know,
okay.
Another issue.
But you're not done yet. This
okay.
is just the beginning.
Oh,
you're just the beginning. This is the stage that we entered in when we found out that Dr. Fujinara had perfected the art of hatching shrimp and bringing the larval shrimp to a stage where at least half to 2/3 of them would stay alive from the original shrimp. In other words,
that's a big jump on nature, isn't it?
Oh, a tremendous jump.
Exponential.
And that's when we entered into the picture. We thought we had it made.
Yeah, I would have thought.
Yeah,
I mean,
but you're not even halfway home.
We're not halfway home.
No, you are not even starting.
Long trail winding up that Mount Sisyphus.
Maybe you're a quarter of the way home.
Okay.
And we thought we thought we had it. We'd already hit the home run.
You were in touch with him. You were in on the ground floor of it emerging, the consciousness that we might be able to have this.
He came to the DuPont company with this knowledge that I've just described.
Yeah.
And said, we want the DuPont company to pick up this incredible, because see, shrimp in those days, it was a $1 billion market.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a premium market.
It was always premium, right.
And it was a high-end market, easy to sell. There was no problem merchandising it.
Right.
All the channels for merchandising were set up. The processing was all set up. All you needed was a production
And
facility.
that $1 billion, you're saying, that was coming out of what you would call, for want of a better term, natural sources, or out of the oceans and so forth.
Well, that's
happened.
worldwide now.
Yeah, right.
Of which the United States and Japan, between the two of them, consumed about 700 million pounds. We were the big market. The rest of the world had the rest. And most of the shrimp were produced in continental United States and Mexico.
With shrimp boats, it would be out with trawlers or something.
Right.
They get it out of the natural environment.
Right.
Sort of like domesticating cattle or something in a way, the process.
A shrimp net actually is a relatively new invention. It's like almost like inventing the plow. The what they call the autotrawl, which had a cork line and a lead line on the bottom and 2 doors on the side, was quite an ingenious engineering feat.
When did it come on the scene, do you think? When did it come on the scene? We've been eating shrimp
I would say in the 30s.
In the 30s, yeah, 1930s.
Late 20s.
Were they eating shrimp in the courts of the emperors of Rome? I mean, did they have that? Does it go way back? Yeah, China, do they do?
Shrimp go back 20 million years.
20 million, they do, we don't. We don't go back that long.
No, we don't go back 20 million.
No, not.
But shrimp have been in stasis. That means they have not changed. This is another impediment we had, and I'll get into that in our later work. They have been in stasis for 30 million years.
Wow, that's a long haul.
Yeah. So now when you start, Dr. Kataka that came over from Japan, and when he found out we're going to have to alter the life cycle of shrimp, he went back to Japan. He said, they haven't changed for 30 million years. What makes you think you can change them now?
Yeah.
We'd spent half our money. We had to change them.
You had to change them because, what did have to be changed?
Well, we had to change. Now, I haven't gone into what the problems are. This thing is endless.
Well, I thought you had a gold mine.
Yeah, well,
sound like a gold mine. You had a product that everybody wants. You could produce 50 million of them. You could just put them in there.
I know. That's what we saw.
It's like Neolithic agriculture.
You know how long it took me to sell the first $3 million, which today would have been about $10 million?
How long did it take you to do that?
30 days.
30 days, okay.
And guess how much it cost us?
How much?
$9,000.
Wow, that was a good deal. So you developed a little bit of financing knowledge.
With one secretary and a few phone calls, we rounded up $3 million.
What year is this now, would you say?
1969.
You were in on the ground floor of this booming, coming shrimp farming operation worldwide?
My partner and I started it.
Mm-hmm.
I was the bag man. I raised all the money.
Okay, well, somebody's got to do it, and you did it, and you had the vision, and you were inspired.
We jumped a step. I was working in the DuPont company, and I was sent down by my boss to interview these Japanese fishermen, and they didn't act like fishermen. They acted like lords of Mitsubishi, you know. Instead of being simple fishermen, they were these high-powered PhDs from the University of Tokyo.
These are people in the shrimp business, are you talking?
Well, they were doing this research.
The research, okay.
Right.
Yeah, okay. The traditional shrimpers are still taking it out of the natural environment.
Right. This is a whole new research project.
Right.
There wasn't any shrimp farming. There were no hatcheries. This was the first one.
And they hadn't done the fish thing yet. Fish farms. They hadn't.
I don't want to talk about fish.
You don't want to talk about fish. Okay.
No, let's not get into fish.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay.
That's another whole new deal.
That's a whole nother kettle of shrimp.
If you want me to come back, I'll tell you about that.
Okay. Good.
Let's not get into fish.
Okay.
Okay. The closest they had come to commercialization is they did sell in Japan, which is too cold to really commercialize shrimp, because shrimp really, to grow them on a commercial scale, they have to be warm water all year round.
Even Okinawa, right?
Well, because you only get one crop. See, if you're close to the Gulf, you get 3 crops, and you can't. If you build all this equipment, you can't shut down for two-thirds of the year. You got to keep operating.
Okay.
Okay. In Japan, now I'll get into another facet of this. They raise Japonicus, which is a big brown shrimp. It's not commercially acclimatized. It's a specialty shrimp. It's not one that you're going to use on a commercial basis, and we found that out. See, there are 200 different kinds of panade shrimp, warm water shrimp. You got to find the ones that really work.
Really work in terms of in
commercial
a hatchery.
Production.
Commercial
grow out.
Oh, pardon?
Grow out. We haven't got to grow out. No, you can hatch them all, but you got to grow them. You got to get them from this size to this size, and they got to be grown cheek to jowl, with outdone and with low feed.
Okay, in order to be viable. Yeah.
In other words, for you to, as a producer, you got to make money, right? You measure it by the crop you get.
Right, right.
So you can put all these little shrimp out, and if they don't grow, well, they're worthless. If they die, they're worthless.
Yeah, but it sounded like an awfully good thing from the get-go with you getting all that research. You must have been very excited when you entered into that.
Why do you think we got all that money in 30 days?
It does help when you're that excited. Everybody imbued with a sense of vision. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know how many findings we had?
How many?
5.
Really? Okay.
All about the same size, and people still kept thinking this thing was going to really pay off, and they kept pouring money into it.
Sure, it'd be like wanting to be in on Ford when he started the Model A.
Exactly. But let me start to describe to you what the problems are. There are 200 different kinds of shrimp you can choose from. Which one are you going to do?
Damned if I know. I have no idea. I mean,
well, we didn't either.
Yeah, all right. Well, you have to
learn.
So you
have to find.
Yeah.
So we had some assistants. There were other people around that were messing around. They didn't have the background we did in hatchery. But the Ralston Purina Company were interested, and they started putting out feelers, and lo and behold, they identified a shrimp that was grown on the Pacific coast of South America called the Van Emite shrimp. It was a white shrimp. We found very quickly that the brown shrimp were worthless. They just didn't do well at all.
Really?
And the brown spot, we had 3 shrimp in Panama City. We had the Satifrus, the Durarum, and the Aztecas. None of them were commercial.
Are those species?
Yes, individual.
Okay. Right, okay. Yeah, okay, yeah, right.
The individual, they were not amenable to commercial production. We found that out very quickly.
And they've all been around for all that long, 50 million
Well,
years?
that's in a natural cycle.
Yeah.
You're talking about an artificial cycle.
Yeah, I know.
See,
technology and mankind introduces artificial things into the whole process, don't we?
Of course.
In a unique way.
That's what
big question.
Listen, and I don't want to get into
I know we're talking
farming,
about shrimp.
but
I know,
that's what farming, hybrids and all that. I'm
Right.
not going to talk about that, but that's you're right. We have introduced technology into growing products, and shrimp had not have been for technology, but we haven't even got started.
Okay,
yet
good.
On the problems.
It's really interesting. It really is. Yeah.
We haven't got started.
And I wonder, maybe I could show now. We'll show it again. Let's see if we can. You got a book you presented me with, and I thank
all of
you
this is
enormously for this book. This is a book he put together, and you come in on it. What's it called again, John?
It's called Memoirs of a Shrimp Farmer.
Boy, you heard it here. This is just a taste of what's contained in this book. It's got pictures and graphs and so forth, and this that he's relating to us here in a conversational format is contained in this book. It's available?
Well, no longer. You can buy. I'm tired of selling this book.
Okay.
It's available on the internet. You can Google me up, John Cheshire, and somebody will have it for sale. I don't sell it anymore, but you can probably round it up.
It's really interesting. Make a heck of a movie. Wouldn't it make a heck of a movie? You get somebody to. I know.
I don't want. I'm too.
Maybe Spielberg could take it up.
I'm not interested in shrimp anymore. So if somebody wants to make a movie, I will be the.
Well, you certainly whetted my interest in shrimp with your story, because it's really interesting and it's very illuminating of the human condition, I would suggest.
I understand.
Yeah.
I've been through it, and that's a stage in my. I used to like horses, but I won't get into that. I go through stages.
I know. Yeah, I understand.
I spent 20 years on this.
On the shrimp thing.
That's enough.
Right. On the shrimp thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you came out of that and you did that. Well, congratulations on having. Now, do you want to go into you wanted to go into some of the difficulties of it?
Let me recount some of them.
And then how did it all end up?
It ended up. Let me go through a few of the stages.
Okay, by all means.
Because first you had to identify the type of shrimp that we're talking about. And that was not easy because you have to do it by the growing area. And the scale of it, we set up a 3,000-acre shrimp farm.
Where?
In Panama City, Florida. That's why I lived down there.
Yeah.
We had a 30-bay hatchery. We turned out, while we were in Panama City, we turned out about, I would say, 5 or 6 billion little shrimp, and we raised about 3 million pounds of adult shrimp.
Wow. Okay. Right.
But none of it profitably. That was the trouble.
Dear. Okay.
Okay. Now, and the logistical problem in Panama City, I had to go all the way down through South America to round up the kind of shrimp we needed, the Van Emmy shrimp from the west coast of South America.
Around Peru or Chile or where?
Yeah, well, no, it's Ecuador.
Ecuador.
Well,
near
and Panama.
Guayaquil.
And Panama.
And Panama, down near El Choco.
Well, fortunately, Ralston Purina set up a hatchery down there. They're in the feed business, and they used to ship us some of the mother shrimp. Actually, they didn't ship us the mother shrimp. They would spawn the mother shrimp and ship us the nauplius, because as I described to you, the nauplius have a feed sack on them, and they would live in cold water for at least 72 hours or almost 96 hours in aerated cold water.
Right.
So you could ship them from there to our hatchery in Panama City, and then we could start feeding them and raising them, and we did that. That was, all of this took a lot of time and effort and money. These weren't the real problems. We learned to our horror that we had not identified the real problems.
Okay, what's the world?
Okay, can you start to suspect what the real problems are?
Heisenberg and the uncertainty principle. I really don't know the market. I don't know.
It had nothing to do with the market.
Didn't have the market.
The production.
The production. No, I can't.
Okay.
I can't.
It turns out that, and Julie, my wife, who her family used to raise Angus cattle, and they all.
There you go. Yeah.
They had 2 international grand. I won't. I said I wouldn't go into this. I'm not going to go. But anyhow, they all died because of Bang's disease. They had this beautiful situation, and it came to nothing. Okay, that's what happened here.
Inbreeding?
No.
No.
The natural shrimp. Once you've gone all through this, you know exactly how to do it. The natural shrimp have virus infection, viral infections.
Okay.
And we didn't really find this out until later, when I was in Ecuador. The banana farmers. This is a strange situation. Yeah. This is on the Guayas River, and bananas are grown down there on the beautiful crops, but they get these diseases, and so DuPont came along and gave them a remedy for a disease that was killing the bananas. Meantime, there had been these tremendous shrimp farms set up on the Guayas River, and one year the total production of the Guayas estuary decreased by about 40 or 50%. It just went downhill. Well, the shrimp farmers said, those banana growers have contaminated the shrimp river, and it's killed all the shrimp, because the water for the shrimp farms was drawn out of the Guayas River.
Right.
Well, DuPont came down there, and it attracted the attention of a biologist from the University of Arizona, and to my knowledge, no shrimp are grown in Arizona, but he got interested.
Okay.
And he identified that it wasn't he and the biologists at the DuPont company agreed that it wasn't what DuPont was putting into the bananas, but it was a native infection of the shrimp itself. It was a viral infection. Well, we found that
It had come up just by happenstance? It happened to come at that time? Naturally. It had occurred naturally.
And all shrimp
could have appeared even if there wasn't the banana industry there. It just happened.
It's just a happenstance that this gave rise to the recognition there were viral infections in the shrimp.
Right.
You see, in the natural order, when they're not concentrated, it's not a big thing. But when you put them all together, it becomes, in some cases, overpowering. And
that's really interesting.
You lose the whole crop.
Okay, that's really interesting.
You've identified it. You know what it is. What do you do about it? Well, we told Dr. Kataka, you got to captively breed these shrimp and breed them in enough generations so they're clean. That's when he went back to Japan. He said, this cannot be done. Shrimp have been around for 30 million years. You cannot captively breed them.
I thought it was 50 million.
Well, maybe it was 50.
A million here, a million there, and pretty soon it adds up to real time.
However long. They've been a long time.
Yes.
And you would think it would be almost hopeless to alter their breeding cycle in an artificial way. Well, it turned out that you can artificially feed the mother shrimp by a rich feed, and if you successfully breed these things for about 8 or 10 generations, and a generation is probably, let's say it's 6 months.
Okay.
So it'd take you about 3 or 4 years to do it.
Yeah.
But by the time that you do that, now you've got a shrimp. It's not really a wild shrimp anymore. It's a domesticated shrimp.
It's like hybridization, or?
It's not hybrid.
Okay.
It's domesticated,
Okay,
though.
well,
in the sense that when you first start breeding them, any little thing will prevent the copulation of the shrimp. It just drives you crazy. If somebody drops a hammer on the floor, they won't breed.
I did my doctorate dissertation on the domestication of the potato, not far from where you were doing that. And when they went from the wild ancestors to what became the commercial crop, it took a long time, and it was very susceptible to frost and kind of things, and they were able to select it out. And that process has gone with lumber cereals or other crops we've developed, and also other things too, the human intervention into the natural process through selection. And that's one of the things that you're trying to do, I guess, within that model you're laying out. Well,
anyhow, in the case of the shrimp, the first time this was done, it's very difficult. But then as it proceeded along, they didn't seem to care. And then it got easier and easier, and by the 8th or 10th generation, now you got a shrimp. Now you have a shrimp that becomes the focus and the reason why shrimp farming is successful. If you didn't have that, all of this shrimp farming would not exist. Now the hatcheries all around have domestically bred mother shrimp, and they can now breed them, and they're scattered all over. And you see, it doesn't take long to develop. And if a natural shrimp gets in there, it contaminates the hatchery.
I'll be darned. Okay.
You got to keep the natural shrimp
Incredible,
out.
Interesting.
No, you don't even use natural shrimp anymore, because you can take the progeny and very selectively you might bring one back in, but be careful, because it'll screw up the whole hatchery.
I'll be darned. A lot of lessons that we were talking about, genetic engineering and things that are going on, and Terminator seeds, all kinds of experiments we're doing, and you had to go through that phase, and so you were too early. My daddy used to say, it's good, young man, to be ahead of your time, but not too far ahead of your time.
No, we were not only too early, but now we're going to get into another phase of this.
We got about 10 minutes left of this program. 58 minutes. We've got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Now, have I been talking that
No,
long?
it's really interesting. Really, a lot of lessons.
Once you get all of this untangled, you've got the shrimp, everything's fine. You can get one, and incidentally, in the grow-out, I didn't talk much about that, because you have to have special water to grow the shrimp out. But once you get these super shrimp feedstock, they'll grow faster, they'll grow on less. You can get them down so that you only get about 1.2 pounds of feed per pound of fully grown shrimp. See? And if you don't have the right one, it takes you 3 or 4 pounds.
Right, and that makes the market, that's impossible.
The cost will eat you up.
They just put the price of gasoline up, so the airplanes are having a hell of a time now.
So you can understand, if you can get a shrimp to grow fast on less feed, that your milk costs are going to be vastly reduced.
That's, in a sense, doing more with less.
And that depends on the quality of your feedstock entirely. That's a control.
There was also a learning curve that had to be done there as you were experimenting with this process and so forth, and you were on the cutting edge of that.
Painful learning curve. Okay, now you got all that done. You're starting to work out your production. You've worked out your. Let's assume you worked out your production problems. The market is open for you.
I would think it's a huge market and growing, and it would be a great boon to humanity to be able to have all that protein and whatnot, and
we increased that farming process, increased the production of shrimp somewhere between 5 and 7 times. It went from 1 billion pounds to 6 billion.
And it's growing now?
And it's still growing. It'll go to 20 billion.
Okay, that's really something. Congratulations on doing the pioneering work that made that happen. You improved the human condition.
I understand, but now one more point.
Yes, sir.
A gringo can't do it.
Gringo can't? Okay.
No, because the only place you can raise shrimp are places which are completely forgive me for saying this on your program,
Yes, sir.
lawless.
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 Okay.
You
We
as
started off talking
you
about the
as
law.
an American citizen cannot go down where you're going to grow these shrimp, own the property, produce the shrimp, take the money that you get from the shrimp, and have a free exchange with the dollars of the United States.
Didn't Chiquita Bananas do that? And the United
your
Fruit
farm
Company?
will be expropriated from
Well,
you.
but you had United Fruit Company ran a pretty tight ship down in a lot of those places and made a lot of money off tropical
I
lands.
understand, and you know the United. Let's talk about just for a second, not for much. One of the big problems we have with South America today was because of the military, the intervention that was necessary to assure that United Fruit could operate above the law in South America.
Above the law.
Above the law. You can't operate that way. As a small man, you have to obey whatever law there is there, which is virtually nothing.
They used to have down south of Panama, between Panama and Ecuador, they had the Choco of the Colombia, and they had the South American Gold and Platinum Company there, a dredge, really rich placer mine and everything, and they operated like, it was American, and they operated like a little fiefdom down there, and what they said went, and everything was. Joseph Conrad would have a wonderful time with that rainforest area.
If you want to pay off the government.
Well, we do, don't we?
Okay. Now, if you want to operate that way, feel free.
Well,
but you can't. You know, you're operating in a system that's completely foreign to most people. You would not invest your family, no family funds would ever go into it. So these are all high-risk funds.
Yeah, well, that's venture, yeah.
You're at risk of having everything expropriated. It's not a normal business situation. So my suggestion to you is don't do it.
Well, I don't think I will. I think I'll stick with television talk, okay? Because it's a little, particularly when it can be produced in a studio this with no risk.
So after all the technical problems, you know how much money we raised on that?
Well, you said some figures earlier. But
$17.2 million in 1972 dollars.
That's real money then.
Yeah,
right?
$50 million today.
Yeah.
You know how much American capital equipment in terms of boats and processing facilities we probably incapacitated? Close to $1 billion.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's Mr. Joseph
Because
Schumpeter.
natural shrimp farming has dropped from the whole market to 5% of the market.
Yeah, that's
imported shrimp have taken over 95, and the imported shrimp are pre-processed, so you don't need processing facilities. You go right into the market.
Well, that would be Mr. Joseph Schumpeter's creative entrepreneurialism as part of a model he used to argue with Mr. Keynes. And do we have a system in place that's going to let us realize the full capability that's evolved, or do we have to have some sort of an alteration in the basic grounding policy assumptions of economic theory and geopolitical theory in order to bring a world that can allow us to realize unutilized capability that's available to us now that hasn't been?
Well,
or do we need a big change from that system that your forefathers helped set up, or the basic premises of it on a world scale?
What we undertook had very unintended consequences, and I often wonder what. If someone asked me, would I do it again?
Yes.
I would not.
Okay, you would not. No? But you were very excited at the time, right?
I was extremely successful. Yeah. And I shouldn't say I would not, because the American consumer has benefited from shrimp. You can buy shrimp in Chicago now at Sam's, and you never could before.
I know. If you knew what you knew, no. This would be the little thing. You did this thing, you experimented, you had problems that were unforeseen, that sort of thing. But if you know what you know now, if you knew then what you know now, would you do it again? And then could you really do it right and avoid the pitfalls?
I don't think you could.
That's a metaphor for life, you know.
No, because the production facilities are in the hands of people which are totally foreign to us. In other words, our investors never had a chance. We had 1,100 stockholders in Marifarms. None of them, if they stuck with it, they would have gotten zero return on. They would have. In other words, the $50 million with the rare exception of somebody that sold out, all of that money was lost.
Yeah, that's a sad thing. It's a thing that like that, but it's an incredibly interesting story that you tell and so forth. And there's lessons galore in there.
Oh.
And I think people they ought to do a film about your venture and so forth. It'd be a very interesting film. Somebody should develop that as lessons in living, and there's lessons to be derived about the whole development of human society and our relationship to the natural environment. And so I congratulate you very, very much. We only scratched the surface of such a very well-led life. And I know that you've got interest in zero-point energy, all kinds of things we could have gone into. This could have to be chapter 1, it would seem to me. And I really thank you enormously for all that well-led life and for coming in and participating in the program. But even in cable television, where we have more time, we run out of time, and I think we've run out of time, John. So thank you. Thank you very much. It's been your pleasure. Let's see, we'll just talk it out. We got a few minutes, we'll talk it out and so forth. Really a pleasure talking about. There's a number of things we could have gone into, because I know you have a very variegated interest, a wide interest both in terms of politics, economics, larger systems, and zero-point energy. I know is a big thing that you're interested in, and it continues. Also physics, you understand. So, but the story of the shrimp is something that is been laid out in some detail here, and there's a lot of lessons in there that I'm going to learn as I watch the program and as the people around the world watch the program. And thank you very much for all of that.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be on your show. No. I love to talk.
I know, I can see, but you talk. No, but there's talk, and then there's real talk, and that was a lesson. That was a real lesson laid out. There's great lessons to be learned, and there are metaphors that you can tie to that in terms of the larger issues confronting the human condition, mankind's role in the natural process. We didn't get into bioengineering or anything that's coming now. Nanotechnology's coming now. All of these technological developments. Are the weapon systems so destructive now that they could threaten the existence of our species? Is there a transformation in terms of the broader evolution of universal consciousness that's characteristic of our time? A lot of questions that we could touch on that the story of the shrimp helps illuminate. If you can understand these larger issues, you can tie that pattern into.
It's a minor chapter, but it's an interesting chapter.
No, but it's very interesting. It really is. All of that, you went with the life cycle and that sort of thing, and we can draw upon that to understand the other issues. So you're living down in Panama City, and also, I guess, over in Pennsylvania?
Well, Molly and my daughter lives in Pennsylvania.
So that
Johnny lives here in the enlightened city of New York.
Yes, yes, the one and only Manhattan. Do you get out here very often? You don't get a chance to get to Manhattan?
Only when my wife, I won't say she forces me, but no one cooks food at my house when she leaves, so... And her family is scattered all over the East Coast. So
well, that's a good reason to travel. You can go and travel and see this wonderful country and catch up with the
We're headed here from here to Maine and New Hampshire.
Wonderful place to be going in the month of August, Maine. Right. I think that's really wise. I think she's a wise woman. You're lucky to have her in your, in your company.
Well, I should mention that and I didn't, in the shrimp adventure, that the only I was the principal bagman, if you want to call it
bagman.
But my wife Julie put up